Hello, thank you for joining us. This is Film Talk Weekly, and I'm Castle Cersei with the Santa Fe International Film Festival. I'm a guest host, and today we have Jhené Chase, writer, director, production designer. Welcome, Jhené.
Sure.
What might we know you from right now or in the past?
So last year, Flaming Hot came out on Hulu and did really, really well. Eva Longoria directed that. And it's about the guy who came up with the recipe for the Flaming Hot Cheeto dust. A
Oh,
really fun,
okay.
really human story. And then this year, this month, a film that we did a couple summers ago called Love Lies Bleeding is premiering at Sundance.
Okay. Um, and for those projects, which role were you filling?
So on Flaming Hot, I was the props buyer. And then
Okay.
on Love Lies Bleeding, I was the set deck buyer.
Okay.
So an example of what I did on Flaming Hot. So we needed probably about 10,000 bags of Cheetos. And at
Okay.
that time, we didn't have a deal with Frito Lay. So it's my job to figure out where we're going to get 2 semis worth of Cheetos from. So I was calling all over the country. They're called the extruded corn snacks, I think is like the vague title for what those are. And so it's just like I'm calling everybody trying to get them. And one of the complications was that in the Cheeto factory, some of those had to not have dust on them. Those are called Colette's naked Cheetos, so that we could see him take them home and then add the flaming hot powder to them. But nobody was willing to allow us access to naked Cheetos because they don't want that product out there in case anybody eats it and they don't like it. It's this whole process. And what ended up happening in Albuquerque at that time, because that's where we shot it, is that they had rolled out white cheddar Cheetos. So I was literally going store to store to store and buying out every single one they had. So all the naked Cheetos in the Cheeto movie are white cheddar Cheeto. It's very complicated and silly, but it's
Okay. And you were just talking about how you worked in LA and you worked in Denver. Where else have you worked? What other film or what other cities have you worked in?
so I had some friends at the film school that wanted to bring me on some art teams. So they took me out to Salt Lake City. We did a war film in Salt Lake City. They took me out to Minnesota where we did a zombie movie. And that's the company that they introduced me to that I've been directing projects for. The first time I worked in New Mexico was on Making a Killing, which Jamie Pels was talking about. I was the production designer on that.
Right. Okay.
And this
Again,
is the
again with
first time
Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Lloyd. So the
Yeah.
last day
Okay.
that he was on set, I didn't talk to him the whole time because he's very introverted.
Okay.
They would bring him over to the art house that we were living in. We were living in a store downtown. And so
Cool.
they'd bring him over and color his hair. They'd bring him over and do costume fittings. And I just always left him alone because he was like very, very sweet, but very, very quiet.
Uh-huh.
So when I was interning on the film that he did in New Orleans, which this is like 10 years later, 14 years later, I don't remember exactly. But it was my job to babysit him on that movie and make sure that nobody talked to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a movie about a cereal bar, like eating cereal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just go sit in the cereal bar with him and not talk to him while he was reading. I mean, we would go sit and eat lunch together and I wouldn't talk to him. So it's just like all this time we spent
And if
together.
someone came up to talk to him, you'd have to be like,
Yeah, we don't bother him.
yeah.
Sometimes I'd stand outside of the set to even just keep anybody from going in at all.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, the last day he was on set, he was with this prop vehicle and I was taking the keys from him to give it back to whoever was taking the car. And I was like, I just really want to tell you something. I don't know if you remember me. I was like, but I was on the cereal movie Flakes that you did in New Orleans. And he's like, oh, I remember that one. And I was like, did you ever see it? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay. He's like, it didn't go anywhere, so I didn't see it. But I was like, I just think it's so exciting because I was an art intern on that movie and I'm the production designer on this movie. And it's just really exciting to get to see you again, like in different shoes. So yeah, it was just a cool thing that happened.
Yeah. Cool.
And actually, there's a scene in that movie where he's in his house and the house has been ransacked and there's like graffiti everywhere. And the handwriting sort of I subverted it so you couldn't read it super well, but I tagged flakes behind his chair.
Oh,
Just a
funny.
little Easter egg for
I'm
myself.
sure there's like all sorts of little Easter eggs in movies that we don't
Yeah.
know anything about. Um, so what's your favorite place to work or your favorite like film community? Or how are they different, if not favorite? Like work compare New Mexico versus LA versus Colorado.
So Colorado's really friendly, and that's one of the things that I really liked about it. And you feel like you're going to work with your friends. It doesn't matter if you're doing commercials or short films. Everybody's kind of knows that they're going to run into each other again. It's very much like a small community. Well, the olive film is very small, but Denver is like a very friendly kind of place. And then you go to LA, and it just feels like more cutthroat. It's harder to work because there's so many people coming through that are prepared to do that work at all times. So you don't run into as many people as often as you think you would. Because it's not, I don't know how to describe it. There's new faces all the time. You get on a film, sometimes you're working with like 20, 30 people. You expect that you're going to see those people again when that's your background, and it doesn't happen unless you get in with a crew that's bringing you on for the same thing again and again and again.
And you're definitely not going to see them in the city because it's so sprawled and so big. Whereas, like Albuquerque, I'm guessing you probably run into people.
Yeah, so Albuquerque is a union town.
Okay.
There's a union in LA, but I feel like when you first get out there, you end up taking jobs on Craigslist, and you're in the Wild West portion of the LA market. And Albuquerque definitely has like that wild spirit. A lot of indies come through here, but the indies that come through here, they sort of have a more union sensibility to them because so many people that man those movies work for the union. So there's certain things that they're not going to put up with that you'll see somewhere else. I didn't end up at the bigger prop houses in LA, but here, there's only a few prop houses. You go to them all the time. You're running to pick up furniture for a show that you're on, and they're building, 3-story high pumpkins for a Nickelodeon show. And it's just like so fun to be in that environment, to see what other people are doing, to go in and you see the jukebox they're going to use in Better Call Saul is tagged, and you see something that was tagged that was used in Independence Day, the sequel. And the crews here are just different because they do the super indie stuff, so they know what that's like. And then they do the union stuff, so they're used to working with bigger stars and bigger sets. I mean, I remember I came here after making a killing. It was a few years later. I came back and I did a really, really small independent film. And while we were doing that, they had turned part of downtown into like this post-apocalyptic space for a Tom Hanks movie they were doing. So I'm just like driving down the road, and I had no idea that set was put up down there. And so you look down the street, and it's just like everything's covered in dust. And I don't know, it's really neat to be around so many projects filming in so many corners. You see, so we have location signs, and they're yellow. They use them almost everywhere that has professional locations people. So they're yellow signs with black writing that have arrows towards which set you're going to. And it's so fun during the height of the season to drive around town and just see them everywhere. And
What is the season?
Albuquerque has a longer season than some of the other markets I've been in, but I would say our season starts around St. Patrick's Day and it goes to about Thanksgiving. And then everybody's sort of off for winter, and then it takes a while for things to start back up. If you can't find a movie to work on at that time, maybe there's a commercial going, or maybe somebody's doing an independent film because they can get really great crew, because so many people are not working at that time.
And like, how do you find work? Like, obviously, you're established, like, you have like a long history working in film. But even you have to go find work. Like, how do you do that? Or do they find you? Like,
So everybody says it. It really is like a word of mouth business. I think when you're first starting, you don't realize that every single thing you do is an interview. I'll be on one show. I think, I remember I did a music video, I did costume design on a music video. And somebody called that director and asked him who his costume designer was, and they recommended me. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how I got that commercial job. They expect for a professional person to show up, for them to treat the job professionally. So you can't have different layers of how you take that job on. If you're too good to work for a lower rate, you just don't take the lower rate.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to a point where you've been working, I've been in the business for over 10 years now. So there are certain jobs where I'm like, I know that I can't do that job because I'm going to have an attitude about how much I'm getting paid. If you're in a place and you're trying to start, I would recommend doing a lot of jobs and seeing what about you can like bloom in different places, you know?
I mean, in the creative world, like I work with a lot of creatives, and you always hear like, "Don't work for free," or which is something that I think it's a case by case basis. But you get a lot of this like, "Don't never work for free," but like, how is that in the film world? Like, obviously, you're saying work for free, like,
Well, some
or
people
don't do
don't.
things for exposure. Like we all get told that, like.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely don't want to be taken advantage of. And there are people that would disagree with me about this point. I think for me, if somebody's paying me, I want to know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that it's not a unique thing about me, but there's some people that feel that way. And there's some people that are like, if you're going to spend the day there, like get paid for it. And if you can do that, get paid for it. But if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really good idea to just ask somebody who's already doing it if you can help them for a day.
Yeah.
And I'm saying exposure, but not that exposure, but exposing yourself
Exposing yourself.
what's in the job. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more along your lines of thinking, and maybe that is you know, I don't know if that's film based or like a different generation from maybe like the new group coming up saying like don't work for exposure. But I tend to say do work for, just be choosy about it. Like try to look at it like who's involved, who are you going to meet, like what other things can you get out of it. So I
Yeah,
would say
definitely figuring out what the value in it is for you.
yes. Yes. If there's no value and you feel taken advantage of, then that's a no, I think. But
So
right. So like, did you need two semis full of Cheeto bags or like
yeah,
loose
so we
Cheetos?
would get bags of Cheetos because they don't do them in bulk.
Uh huh.
I'm not sure. I think it probably would have been more difficult for them. They would have had to change a process to get them to us that way. So they all came in bags. Now, the movie takes place in like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then 2000. So those bags were not the bags that are on the shelf right now. So we would get those bags. We'd have to pull them all out. The graphics department would make energetically similar bags to the bags at the era that Flaming Hot came out, and then we'd rebag them. The props department would rebag it all.
And did Frito Lay ever like collaborate with you, or did they sanction
They
this
did.
project? Okay.
Eventually, we were able to get through. I think we got through with one of the producers through Pepsi.
And did you ever make it inside the Cheeto factory?
No, so they shipped them to us here,
Hmm.
and the factory that's in the movie is actually the old um, Albuquerque Journal newspaper factory.
Cool. I need to watch this. That's like right up my alley. So why don't you take us from the beginning? Like, when did you know you wanted to be in this business? Take us from the beginning.
I think one of the things that's interesting for me is like I didn't think that somebody that wasn't rich could be a filmmaker. I never had that thought. I wrote short stories. I painted as a kid. I would write poetry. At some point I started making clothes, and then I was doing photography to try and recreate things that looked like avant-garde magazine photo shoots. And then it's like I'm part of the generation that read the Robert Rodriguez book, Rebel Without a Crew. And you can do it. You just have to come up with some amount of money and then you do everything. And so once I read that book, I started reading all these filmmaking books.
And
And
where is young Jhené? Where are you living? Like, where are you from? Where you're doing this?
I grew up in Southern California. So a lot
Okay.
of that happens there. Once I'm in high school, I moved to Denver. So then it starts happening there. Um, I get this idea that I'm going to just try to get to film school. Because a lot of people, I think, are a lot gutsier than I am about certain things. I didn't want to move to LA and be a PA. I was so scared of going somewhere and not knowing what I was doing. So I started my idea of film school at the University of New Orleans. I went home to visit Denver, and Hurricane Katrina passed through and everything shut down and I couldn't get back in the city. So at that point, I started working in a warehouse. I thought my dream was over. I couldn't figure out how to put it back together. And then my job was ending. They were closing down unexpectedly. And I was like, I just have to try. I can't seem to let this idea go. So I found out that Colorado had a film school. And so I was going there within the week. And it felt like the first time that all the different avenues of art I was interested in, writing, photography, clothing, makeup, the art side of it, it all came together for the first time. If you've ever seen any of my early work, it's like, I sort of refuse to believe that we couldn't make the big crazy stuff. So it's like, we need a tree. So we'll just build a tree out of cardboard. And we'll just do it inside because it's too cold outside. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, I wanted to make this big fantasy project. So we would get together every weekend on trash day and I would make lists and everybody would go out and, it's like, I need a chair and I need this. And we would bring it all back and we would just paint it all and put it together. And I think being so willing to just make it out of trash, to just like suspend this disbelief for as long as I could, to hold it together. It's a really invigorating feeling. It changes your life to have an idea and to somehow get it all together, even though you don't have money and you don't know what you're doing. And then on some level it succeeds. There's failures in there too, but on some level it succeeds and it keeps you going to figure out what the next thing's going to be.
Yeah. So how long were you at Colorado Film School?
I was at the film school for a long time. I think so. I started like fall 2009, and then I went until like summer 2013. Okay. And I remember the last semester was like, it felt like they had rebooted the series I was on, and I was like one of the old characters, and I didn't know anybody anymore. And I was like, it's time to get out of here. Like, there's nothing left for me here.
And what was your first paid gig?
So my first paid job was for Haler Garcia. He was doing a film called An American Terror, and they needed a costume designer, which I was terrified to do. But I went down there and I was like, I think I can do it. And they were like, can you glue cereal to cereal? Is that the kind of thing you can do? Can you be outside of the box? And I was like, for sure, that's the one thing I can do. Yeah. I can do that. And that ended up creating like the beginning of my film family in Denver. The first time I felt like I understood other people. I had mentors that I could reach out to. It's like, how do you get work? Where do you go? What do you do? How do I figuring it out? Mm-hmm. And that really changed everything. And that was the summer of 2012. We did that one.
Okay. And then, so you continued to work in Denver. Was there enough of a community and like enough projects going on to make it?
No. I didn't realize it at the time, because you don't know what you don't know when you're experiencing not knowing it. Mm-hmm. And so I kept feeling like there was a place to break into. And I think Denver's an interesting market because you kind of have indies, Colorado Film School sort of keeps this spirit alive with short projects that are sort of always going on. And then there's a pretty decent commercial market, but the commercial market is thin, It feels like once you start working in commercials that someone will have to expire for there to be a place for you. Mm-hmm. So by the time I was gearing out of working in Denver, most of my projects were commercials, but it still wasn't enough to have an apartment. And, this is my couch surfing phase where I'm like, I just have to figure out the work. I don't care where I live. I don't care the kind of projects I'm working on yet. So then I launched out to LA for a while. and I felt like it was really hard to work. It was really toxic working. And there's just this underlying idea everywhere that if you're not sort of like sniveling and easy, and if you don't fit into every single mold, and if you're not like licking boots all the time, that they're gonna send you back where you came from. There's this very much like, if you don't do it exactly the way I want you to do it and take all this abuse, then we're gonna fire you and find somebody else.
And you're lucky to be there, kind of
Yeah, and
thing.
that's just
Yeah.
like a really
Jhené, one thing I want to talk about with you, I mean, just this whole series that we're putting together is about like not the struggle, but like the process and the climb, and like how you can make a career out of the film business. And um I guess I'm curious, like, what's it like being you, like in a room full of like people you're working with? What's it like being a woman of color? Like, talk about that. Do you know, like, and how has that changed over the years? I'm guessing it might have.
when I first started going to film school, I was one of the only women in my classes at all. And then being a woman of color is such an anomaly to that. Um, and I didn't realize how unique my voice was until I started listening to the voices around me. And I remember seeking out other Middle Eastern female directors, which I honestly only follow two, and I'm so obsessed with both of them. But one of them is Marjan Satrapi, who's from Iran, and she did Persepolis. And then there's Anna Lily Lampour, who did A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
I've met
And
her
they're
before.
both,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're both like these punk rock Middle Eastern women who've got that influence, who've come into the Western world. I mean, one of my favorite things ever is that A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, the setting of that film is the half melted memory she had of Iran mixed with LA.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you're not gonna get out of somebody that hasn't had those cultures fused together.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find that so stunning. And I think that to share my voice, and that hopefully anybody else who's wanting to do it that can relate to me at all will get something out of it.
And do you feel like it's appreciated, and how has that changed over the time period? Because lots changed in the industry and in you know the world, as far as like recognition and Me Too and representation of people of color. Like, what have you noticed over the years, or have you?
So we had a character in this community who was a producer. I had heard stories about him. I had heard stories that things had happened with him with different women that were not good. And my response to that was always like, if women were working for me, you're never alone with him. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
remember doing this film with him, and it's like we'd have to turn in receipt packets because he's the line producer, and I was just like, you're never alone with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't had an experience like that with him, but to me, it's just like, let's just
Yeah.
don't be anywhere where we can have that experience. And if you have somebody that's going to be looking out for that behavior, if you have somebody who's not going to make the choice to hire somebody like that, you can kind of clean things up. I think that's our responsibility in who we hire, in the choices, in the jobs, in the choices that we're making to be part of. I mean, that's the hard thing. It's like, if you don't have money, you end up working on the film with that guy. That's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't been able to build yourself up enough at a time that's lean, you end up in a room with that person. And so, part of what I want to do is, at some point, I want to be producing my own work, and the alchemy of teams that you put together and what can come out of those, and treating people really well. It's our responsibility to do that, every single one of us. And, there's always a joke about snowflakes, but it's like, people get upset when they're treated horribly. So
Right.
we can't
Right.
treat people horribly. We have to
Yeah.
make different decisions.
Yeah. And you feel like it's getting better?
I mean, I feel like that's a case by case basis too.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like I hear more people speaking up, which I really appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
I think once people speak up, then it opens the window and other people feel like they can speak up. If nobody's speaking up, you feel like you just have to endure whatever's going on because that's the culture that you're in. And so
Right.
there's definitely a cultural shift. I think we could get farther. And I think, one of the things that bothers me is, I said snowflake. It's not usually a term that I say, but it's like, instead of worrying about people being upset with your behavior, like, let's just change the behavior, especially if we're in a place like work. I mean, say whatever you want in your own time, but when we're at work, it's just like, tighten it up.
Right.
We don't need to cross those lines.
Yeah. It seems so logical, but
It seems logical. It's like
yeah.
we're all working off of different logical systems, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, have you had instances where you were afraid to speak up, and do you feel more confident doing that now as you've progressed in your career?
Yeah, I mean, especially once you're in a leadership role, I think you have to get really accustomed to having the uncomfortable conversations, to
Mm-hmm.
addressing issues when they're coming up. You don't have to blow up the whole scene to get it taken care of, but if you don't do anything, then you're part of the problem. It's just the way that it is. And, like I said, the film community is very tight knit. And if you're not taking care of the people that you're with, you're not going to have anybody with you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's how it works.
And have you encountered like discrimination? Do you feel like there's like better representation for women and people of color? Like, do you have any words of wisdom or
I mean, I
stories?
definitely have seen a lot more women of color working in the industry than when I first started.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've had people say weird things to me um, on occasion. Ugh, I feel like there's this component of being a woman where you have to prove yourself every single time you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, somehow your work history doesn't follow you as closely as you would like it to. It's like sometimes it doesn't feel like you're building by getting those credits. Sometimes it feels like you're starting from scratch all the time. It's like, I have this new male boss and I have to come in and prove myself again and again and again. And it's hard when you know what you're doing because you don't want to be um, thin skinned, wearing your ego on the outside. Like, that doesn't look great on anyone. But at the same time, I do feel like my male counterparts get more respect that clings to them a little bit closer than I do. But I've worked really hard to be a great team player, to uplift other people when I've had the opportunity to. I really try to be the person where if there's an opportunity in the room and there's somebody that I know that's right for it, that I say their name there.
Mm-hmm.
I really try to be the kind of person that I want to be around, that I want to be surrounded with.
I'm sure your work speaks for itself, and you probably just get like people see your work, and then who did that, and you often get hired before they even know very much about you. I'm guessing, they probably fall in love with your work first. Like, so working behind the scenes like that, it's probably, you know, I would guess it might be easier.
I prefer to work behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I really love being like the hamster in the hamster wheel. I
Uh-huh.
really do. Like,
Uh-huh.
I love coming up with the idea that saves the day. Like, I think, we have all these stories about heroes. I think all of us want to be a hero. So getting to bring that one thing that we needed that out of context makes no sense.
Find the naked Cheetos.
But find the naked
Yeah.
Cheetos. And it's
Yeah.
like, I was a hero that day. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the cool thing about being in this industry is like you get to be a hero sometimes. And like,
Yeah, I mean, that's what I always think about creatives, and especially in film, like they're the best problem solvers. You know, you're problem solving your life, you problem solve the Cheetos, you know, you've problem solved the pandemic and the strike and cancer, you know, just moving it out of the way and solving the problems like a true creative.
I really do dig deep, and I do say, like, get out of my way. I've
Yeah.
said that a lot in the last few years. Like, if you're not contributing, if that's a thing, if that's a person, if that's a situation, get out of my way. Like,
I want to talk more about Albuquerque. Like, I think everyone in the kind of western, like Colorado, New Mexico region knows that Albuquerque is a hub. I think a lot of people think of it being Netflix only, but I'm getting the idea talking to you that there's more going on there. What, what's happening down there? What's the vibe of the, it's an industry town, right?
yeah, I mean, I think the jobs that are available here are some of the most diverse in any of the markets that I've personally worked in. And I haven't worked in New York. It's one of those markets that I want to work in. But I was able to work on a documentary for the History Channel, which, being somebody who's in art, you don't really imagine yourself having the opportunity to work on a documentary, but they were doing something about Roswell and they wanted to recreate the crash. And so I got to do something like that, which as a creative is so fascinating because, there's no footage of that. You're recreating something that was a memory of somebody from like the 1940s. I think that's fascinating.
Not everyone can live that way. I've realized.
No.
Yeah, it makes a lot of people very nervous. But tell us about some, like, the strike is a struggle. I'm sure the pandemic was a struggle. Like, tell us like some of this, because this series is kind of becoming about like the climb, I don't want to call it a struggle because you're doing what you love, but like, you know, how do you make it? And like, what are some of the pitfalls, I guess, and like things you have to overcome, like in your career, recent history, even just from the pandemic or, you know.
you know, a lot of second unit on really giant movies comes here. I think I mentioned Independence Day was shot here. Part of Transformers was shot here. And like I said, in the part of the season where there's production going on everywhere, we were working on Flaming Hot. Our offices were upstairs, and they were shooting MacGruber downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So fun to go running through their set, coming in and out of work. We also have, I mean, I worked on one of the last Bruce Willis films that shot here. It shot in Las Cruces, and it was the kind of thing where they were doing a feature in 5 days, and it was just wild.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the lower budget films, what you'll find out is, so Albuquerque has a really great film incentive. That's why there's so much going on here.
Okay.
And they bit the bullet. They put in the infrastructure, and that's why stuff comes to us. It's not just that there's the incentive, there's the incentive, and then if you need medicine balls that look like they came from the 1980s, there's somebody here that can fabricate those.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's a lot harder to find in a market like Denver. So they shot part of Oppenheimer here, and we got the medicine balls for Love Lies Bleeding. I went in, I was talking to that craftsperson who makes those, and he was talking about how Oppenheimer was like did all of their draperies through him. So he paid his rent for a year doing draperies for Oppenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they do here is they also do a deeper incentive in the smaller communities. So we're seeing a lot of films go through Las Cruces right now. It's like 3.5 hours south. And, they can also jump the border and work in El Paso once you're down that way. I did a Christmas film I designed last March in a town called Ruidoso, which is a ski town. So they've got a ski lodge up there. The cool thing is, like, you move here and you think you're just going to be working out of your own apartment and that it's going to make doing film work like working for the DMV, but you get to go somewhere else and they put you up in a hotel, or, everybody gets an Airbnb in your department, and you get to like bounce around everywhere, which makes it kind of an exciting place to live. It's like, I got to go see White Sands because it was an hour away from where we were filming. And I think that it makes it so fun to work in this market, to be able to be in your home and to like have that comfort and then to get to go work on location. I mean, I think a lot of us get into it to get out of the house sometimes and to
Yeah.
be on the adventure of making a film, and you get to do that here, and that's so fun.
And like, are you making a living like right now doing this? Like, and how did the strikes affect you? Like where are you at? And maybe even other like where's everyone at right now? Like,
I mean, I remember when I got the text message. I had a friend working on a TV show, and I got the text message. It was like, I think the strikes are about to hit our shore. And
mhm.
it was so, the air was so electric. You had a couple people that were working, and you were just waiting to hear when everything was going to shut down. And kind of staggered, the people that were working got to stay working. I unfortunately had said no to two smaller projects because I had just gotten home from Rio Doso doing that Christmas movie. So there just wasn't much. And the work that there was available was for almost like half or a third of the rates from what it was before the strike, because they knew that they could just pay you anything because there wasn't anything going on. So, during all this time, I've worked 2 days a month, 2 weeks if I'm lucky on something, in the Albuquerque area. I know a lot of people that are in the union that went and got jobs as bartenders and servers and
Yeah, what do you do? How do you subsidize, or how do you make it all work? Or do you just
it's
save
hard.
and then
It feels like sometimes I'm holding everything on a really thin strand.
mhm.
Doing the art department, I end up with kind of a lot of crazy furniture sometimes that we don't get rid of. And, sometimes I'll sell things off like that. Or, I've applied to work at, in concessions at the balloon fiesta. Like I sort of I'm a circus person anyway, but I really become a circus person during this period where it's like, I'll kind of do whatever pays,
Right.
you know?
As long as
Uh,
it's gig related, so you're available to pick up something, you're not
Well,
going to
that's
take it.
the problem with getting trying to go and get a brick and mortar job is like
Right.
that kills the spontaneity that you need to be able to have in your
Right.
availability.
Yeah.
So it's
I
like
think
you
a
got to
lot
you
of
have to make
creatives,
a place.
a lot of
Yeah.
creatives, and that's why people freelance. And so you are available for the big thing, but you still gotta,
It's a lot of jumping out of a plane and not being
yeah,
sure if the parachute is going
yeah,
to open up and get you safely to the ground.
yeah,
Sometimes you get dragged a little bit.
yeah.
The last few years have been absolute chaos. I moved here at the end of 2019. I was staying with a friend. I'd finally worked a movie. And so I got an apartment. I signed my lease February 2020. I go to Roswell to work on a movie that eventually comes to a screeching halt before we
Mhm.
began filming. And then I come back and I sit in my apartment for months waiting for something to happen. I mean, and I had come here because there was a catastrophic project that didn't pay me right before that. So the pandemic was really difficult. I mean, even when projects were starting to come up, it was like so nerve wracking because we didn't know how terrible the virus was. Like, even when you were going to work and you were wearing masks. I mean, I remember I did a TV show that October in Garson Studios, which CFF, Colorado Film School, used to feed into the film school that was there. That film school shut down. That's a film studio now. And I'm working in the middle of the night. I'm working as an art PA, and they're shooting overnight, so I have to stay in the office. I'm the only person in the building. It's like, it's a 2-story film school. It's like filled with all these rooms, and it's required that I wear a mask, even though I'm by myself for 8 hours in the middle of the night, and then I drive home at 4 a.m. And I just remember thinking, like, if I had any idea how sad it was going to be to sit in this room wearing a mask, just silently waiting to hear what's going on. Um, but it gets better, right? Like you do your hard time, and it can only be low so long, and then you come up. So it ends up being summertime, and I get hired on my first Disney project, and I'm just like screaming excited about that, and I'm getting to be in meetings I have no business being in.
What's the Disney project?
So the Disney project was Flaming Hot, and
Oh,
I get
okay.
to be in
Okay.
rooms with Eva Longoria, listening to the
Uh,
way she's talking to other people, which sparks so much joy for me to get to see a woman like that just work a room, do what she does, be in control, be in command, and helm something like that. Like, that's an incredible thing to get to be around. And I finally get my days. I get into the union. It took me a year and a half, but I finally am doing what I came to do. And then I got diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had to leave that show before it even finished. And, I was lucky it was only a year of treatment, but it's like I go through this whole year of treatment. I get burned to the ground. Like, I crawl my way back. I start working again. And then the strike happens.
right.
And it's one of those things where I'm so lucky that I've been in this industry just long enough, because what being a freelancer in the film industry teaches you is solutions. This job is about communicating and solutions, and being able to have that at the forefront of my mind, and to be like, how do we get through it? What's next? It's not that there aren't bad days. It's not that they're not really bad days.
Ever think of giving up? Like, have you been at that point at all?
I haven't, because even when I'm not working for 2 weeks, I'm just dying to get back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I see people who have left the industry, and I understand why you would leave. For me right now, I just can't. It's still too much like frenzy in my blood. It still makes me so exciting. It makes me so excited to be a part of it. It's like when you make something really magical happen that you weren't planning on, that makes all of life worth it for me, to get to be in those moments with other people.
You can't do anything else. Like,
No, and I
going and
really recommend that
working.
you don't do this unless you can't do anything else. Like, if you
Yeah.
can do something else, pick that.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that I've been trying to do over the last few years, and what I would recommend to anybody that's going to get into gig economy, freelance economy, is really figure out how to diversify where your income is coming from. Do other things that are passively working on income for you, so that you can not be white knuckling it through the times when there's less
Yeah.
work, when the world shuts down.
Yeah. Um, yeah, no, I can relate to that as a
Yeah.
freelance creative, for sure. But yeah, there's for some of us, there nothing else, doing something else that is not our passion is not an option. So it's like, how do you? But it seems like you've overcome. I mean, seemingly the worst things, like a pandemic, a strike, breast cancer. Like I just think it's all going up from here. And you're working right now, or you've got things in the mix. You have something going to Sundance, right?
That was when I was a set deck buyer on. So I won't be able to go to Sundance, but yeah, it's going to be opening
Okay.
up at Sundance this month. I might even be within the week from now.
Okay. And you can't say what that is.
That one's Love Lies Bleeding.
Love Lies Bleeding. Okay.
Rose Glass, who did oh no, that's my brain. She did a movie that's on it's on Amazon right now, but she's a really interesting female director. It stars Kristen Stewart. Should be really interesting. I think people are going to be excited about it.
Okay. I feel like I've heard about that.
Oh,
And
Saint
then,
Maud. Saint Maud is the one she directed. That's already out.
okay. And other things we should check out of yours: summer dropouts,
Summertime Dropouts. Yeah.
summertime dropouts.
And then I
That's
have a
on.
mini series coming down the pipeline. I'm not exactly sure we're going to be done with that yet.
Hmm.
But they're also doing a graphic novel for it, and I'm hoping we're doing a toy line. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's fun. So, do you have input into that? I'm guessing, being the production designer.
I
So.
think so. That's one I directed. The production designer I was able to collaborate with them a little bit. So the toy line, I believe, if it ends up coming out, is based on some of the weaponry that was used in the film.
Uh-huh. Cool. And also, what else do you have like in the works, like coming out soon or that you're
So
working on
I've
right
been
now?
developing a Christmas horror script for a couple years. I'm not exactly sure when we're gonna do that. We're still kind of putting funding together for that, but that's
Hmm.
really exciting. I feel like I was able to co-write something with that producing team that should be really, really fun. I think the vision of it's gonna be kind of a new take on it. I know it's sort of becoming a flooded genre like the Christmas horror movie, but I think ours is gonna be different and pretty fun. And then I'm hoping to get into a passion project that I'm starting to develop after that. That's um, like a fairy tale take on a journey through trauma, which I think is going to be something that's really uplifting. I hope because it's about finding the beauty in the struggle.
Cool. I like that. I mean, I like the process in general of life and career and all that. So we're finding the beauty in the struggle here today with Jhené Chase. Thanks for joining us. This is Castle Cersei from Santa Fe International Film Festival, and this is Film Talk Weekly. We'll see you next week.